besides the cannabinoids, which are like THC, which gets you high, or you may have heard of CBD, which doesn't get you high but has a lot of medicinal properties, and the other cannabinoids, CBC, CBG, CBN, which all have their own properties. Besides those, you're also checking for terpenes. Terpenes are the things that give you the aroma. They too also have medicinal properties, but that is what we talk about potency. We also have to test for anything that can be toxic.
This is another HPLC. This is a different, more modern version of the other system. This is where, this is a mass spec. So we're doing LC triple quad mass spectrometry. So you get very, very, very low detection limits. It's a very highly sensitive instrument. And so we inject our sample here by HPLC, and then we detect it through mass spec triple quad detection. So over here is where you'll be running pesticides and mycotoxins. So that's what this system is for. And this is a GC triple quad system. So it's similar to this, but different, because that's liquid chromatography, this is gas chromatography, but it's also a highly sensitive instrument. So what this will be running is another set of pesticides that need a lower detection limit compared to this system over here.
This system will not detect all the pesticides we want to check. This one will not detect, but combined, we get a full gamut that we need to be able to convince other entities that we've covered all the bases.
So this system is called an ICP mass spec. I'm still in the process of getting it connected with its gases and its auto sampler. But this is where you'll run a full list of metals. Okay, so this is more of an inorganic system as opposed to your organic systems out in the other lab.
And you're talking about lead, mercury, arsenic,
yes, sir.
Which are critical, must be absent
Yes.
from products.
Right.
You know, you don't want to send a product away and it has traces of mercury, traces of lead in it. This is the new method of checking for E. coli, salmonella, and for fungus and so forth, using these particular methods. And so these are the new modern methods of checking microbiology and so forth.
Hi, my name is Matthias Piasecki. I am the CEO of Validity Laboratory Services. We're here in our lab of Caribbean Gold Standard. We are very excited to be here and opening our high complexity lab in the Caribbean. Here we will be testing medicinal cannabis, fish, fruit, meat, imported goods, exporting goods, as well as validation testing for pharmaceutical and on-the-shelf products that exist today for quality control and standards. One of the reasons that we decided our lab here would be called Caribbean Gold Standard is that we believe, and we are in full support of St. Vincent being the gold standard of what it means to provide quality products to their country and the region, and what it means to be the gold standard in the Caribbean.
Cannabis, if it isn't dried properly and it is still a little wet, it can develop fungus, mold, and you don't want that. Some people may use the cannabis for treatment of asthma, but guess what? If it has mold in it, the mold can make the asthma worse or can trigger asthma. So the testing of these products can give it a full stamp of approval, what we call a certificate of analysis, which will serve as a passport for export.
It took the lab some time to get here. How did the absence of this particular analytical service impact on traditional cultivators being able to get their crops to market?
Well, I would say, and I don't want to put it down, in the past, because of the legal nature, persons would harvest their crop very quickly, put it into some buckets or sacks, and try and maybe sometimes even bury it, hide it away. And then they would take it out and then try and ship it off in a boat in the middle of the night to some destination. In terms of neighboring islands, there was never any trade to get it to well international circles. And all this would have been quite illegal. What I am referring to is that in terms of the type of product that you need to ship away, it's not going to be put in a sack anymore. It's not going to be put into buckets or buried. It's going to be carefully handled with gloves. It's going to be trimmed. It could be machine trimmed or it could be hand trimmed. One of these companies is actually employing ladies who come from Chateaubriand and Petit-Bordel, who are some of the finest hand trimmers, I would say, in the world. And they're able to create buds that actually look excellent. But it's not just the flower that one is talking about. And, you know, for everybody, I want them to know, in the old days, people used to think that the active ingredients of the cannabis was in the leaves of the plant. It's not, it's in the flower. And that's why they call it the flower buds. But inside those flower buds, do you know there's a lot of oil? That's what they look after, the oil. And they could use the flower buds or they could squeeze it and process it to extract that oil, just as if you're extracting coconut oil, just as if you're extracting virgin coconut oil. But they will use some very special measures to extract that coconut oil. And they could then further separate the oil into the different components. You heard me mention THC, CBD. They can have special isolates and extracts and so forth. And it's fascinating because I want to say that CBD sells for something like $300 a pound, a kilo I should say. Whereas THC, the product that gets you high, sells anywhere from about 12,000 to 27,000 per kilo. Whereas some of the more important, or the other important cannabinoids, CBG, CBN, CBC, sell for 70,000 US per kilo. And so going after this in a much more organized way is quite important. And it can benefit everybody. And at each step of the way, having a lab which can test and see exactly what type of product you have and how, if it is being separated properly and the quality is quite critical.
How would the traditional farmer get access to the services?
Yes. Now, the way in which things have been set up, I would say that anyone in St. Vincent who has a license is able to export. I know I'm going to get to your question, is able to export, whether it's a traditional cultivator or it's an investor. But typically, the investor is going to have spent, it would have spent a lot more time and effort and money to secure an export market. And the way we've set things up is that the investor must, on the basis of their license, must also buy from a traditional cultivator. And they have to buy a certain percentage. There are some investors who are going to buy 100% of their product from traditional cultivators. The minimum that can be purchased is about 10%.
Can or should be purchased?
Yeah?
The minimum that should be purchased?
The minimum that when, and the MC will monitor that particular investors will honor that obligation and purchase. So the minimum amount of product that they will be required to purchase from traditional cultivators will be 10%. But others will purchase 50%, others will purchase 100%. What happens is there is usually a contract that will be developed between the traditional cultivator and an investor. And this contract has to be approved by the MCA to make sure that it is fair to the traditional cultivators and to probably all parties involved. And we've been doing that sort of work and so forth. And the various contracts will include a lot of things in terms of what sort of inputs are provided to the traditional cultivators, what is the upfront payments, what is the payment after at the end of the thing, how long it would take, and all those sort of things. And
does the MC get involved in like the price?
We bring people together in order to arrange their own price. So there will be a number of farmers linked to one investor. There will be a number of other farmers linked to another investor. There isn't going to be one price across the board. It may be different, and
why is that the case?
Some of it may vary in relation to quality and the actual quality of the actual process and so forth. And some investors may decide to give a little more than others, but others may, it's all balancing out. But we monitor this to make absolutely sure that the contractual arrangement falls within a particular type of arrangement. At the MCA, we don't dictate and say, this will be the price, or that will be the arrangement, you must give them this. We try to bring people together so that each parties are satisfied. We think there's been some fair success in relation to this, and we hope that that continues.
Okay. Before we change gears slightly, what is the average selling price per pound for medicinal cannabis now?
Well, these things are still being worked out, and as I say, this is again a contractual arrangement between the various investors and the thing. I don't want to preempt and say this is the price, because it's going to differ from one entity to another. But you may have heard people say $50 a pound. It's far, far, far more than that. You understand? And let me stop there without dictating a price and say this is the price, because that's not what the MCA does. We don't say this is the price, but we monitor the situation to make sure that the price is and there's a fairness involved in what is going on. The thing we're waiting to see really is two things: export, consummating export. Now that we have the lab, because I want to say, prior to not having the lab, somebody will ask, why hasn't cannabis been exported yet? Well, it's the lab. You know what I mean? By having the lab now, you've heard me say it again, it produces the certificate of eligibility, which is a passport for export. And additionally, we are very pleased that, or at least one of the companies has produced product that's already on the ground, that we've also been able to test, that is now available in pharmacies. And I would say over 100 patients in St. Vincent have already started to receive medicinal cannabis products, whether it is creams, or whether it is droppers to be put under the tongue, or whether it is the flower buds themselves in special packages. And most of these flower buds have actually been grown by traditional cultivators and local cultivators who have been schooled and retrained so as to grow their product under good agricultural and collection practices, being conscious of the hygiene issues that are involved. And we're hoping that this training will be extended to a wider cross-section of traditional cultivators in due course.
Doc, of late, it's not anything too strange, because citizens have been arrested, charged, jailed on one charge or the other concerning cannabis.
Yes.
But more so of late, there have been producers, and one in particular has shown a certificate that he was trained, certified by the MCA.
Yeah.
He quite shockingly told me that when officers came to raid his private property, where they removed about 16 pounds of cannabis, which he had brought to his house on the amnesty allowances, they said to him that the certificate which he produced to say this is why I have this ganja doesn't carry any weight. What do you respond? How would you respond to
Well,
these?
I tell you, I've been, to be honest, I've been trying to do some follow-up on this since I heard about it. I haven't got a full report yet to see exactly what certificate was presented. If it was a license that had been actually approved by the MCA, or whether it was a certificate that the person went through training on the good agricultural collection practices. I would stand corrected and so forth on those particular matters, but I'm waiting for a report. Now,
What's the difference there?
well, we've had several training. We had a training course at the Methodist Church Hall where we trained over 120 traditional cultivators on good agricultural collection practices. We give them a certificate, right? I'm not sure if it was that, or whether it was the full certificate of having a license.
And I'm an illegal ganja man because I pay my money at the medical marijuana compound in order to be registered as a traditional farmer. You ain't just go in there and tell them you're a traditional farmer. No. You have to go through a process of bringing out your credential. Your credential is if you ever get locked up, if you ever been to jail for marijuana.
Them is the credentials they're asking about?
The credential you have to answer to.
And if you say yes, you could certify as a traditional.
And if you say yes, it's a part of the process of being certified as a traditional farmer. And you have to come up with a portion of money in order for that to be processed. And you have to have your ID and your photograph take and all these things. It's just like if the police are them interrogating you.
And you know this because you did this. Now somebody tell you about it.
Because I did it. Nobody ain't telling me about it. I know it. I did it. You understand? It had me bummy to do it. But in order to try to be legal, in order to get your program right, you take your chance. And as a man will take chances.
So I have no indication as regards what was the type of product the individual had. Now there was a process of amnesty, and to be truthful, because of laissez-faire, the process of extension of the amnesty was also delayed, but that is going to happen. There's also been a series of other measures to decriminalize the process that needed to go fully into effect. This is all being really handled, not so much by the MCA, but by the Ministry of National Security, and a number of things that really needs to be put fully in place. I've always lamented persons being arrested. For sure, the police have instituted a process what we call tolerance. So individuals who have one spliff of smoking or whatever, once they're not overtly abusing the situation in public, tolerance is going to allow them to do that relatively freely. However, if it is a process that they are engaged in trafficking, full force trafficking, the fact that they have a license and they're saying they have it waiting for amnesty, maybe something of a little bit of a stopgap, but their intention really is to try and trade it to some other island or some other place. And the police force in the other islands have not been happy that this particular trade and so forth is taking place because they're trying to control it. One good thing is that I believe that Barbados, St. Lucia, Grenada, certainly Antigua's gone that way, will eventually all pass legislation that will allow for the legalization of medicinal cannabis. But the individual rules in relation to trafficking and the movement, that I'm sure is still going to be restricted because there needs to be special processes in terms of how you traffic. So having a license or even amnesty does not give you permission to put it on a boat and send it off to another place. These things have to be done under strict control and with the knowledge of the MC. And that's where I think some of the challenges may be, you know. But I think that in general, there has been a significant reduction in the number of persons who are arrested. I have noticed that persons are being arrested for large amounts, in terms of 98 pounds, as a lot of cannabis. And it really suggests that there is trafficking that's in mind, and that it's not part of the system that an industry we're really trying to create here. We do work fairly closely with the police when they have various issues, and they check with us to find out if somebody does have a license, whether they have applied, whether they are in process, and so forth. So I'm not sure of the details in relation to what you are referring to, but we have a tendency of referring. Now, if somebody was to inform us, we are not, let's say, the legal counsel to then go and act on that individual's behalf, but we are there as an entity to be able to provide the necessary information to all individuals who may want to request that information. So if the person would have wanted some sort of assistance or some document sent somewhere and so forth, we certainly would assist in that regard. But just saying that, well, I have some legal problems, without all the details, or without being properly documented, or without their lawyer so contacting us, there may not necessarily be all the follow-up that is necessary, I must admit. So there may be a way of engaging the MCA a little bit more officially, so that we could then properly respond to a particular situation and see that the action is then taken in whatever way possible, whether it is in relation to the prosecution or the police or whatever the case might be. Okay,
and finally, what do you say to traditional cultivators who claim that they are now sitting on amnesty weed and can't find an investor to sell it to?
Yes, well, as I said, one of the problems, we do have equipment that we can test to see the potency of the cannabis. We've always had that. It's not the same as the equipment. Now, the investors themselves who would want to buy and have indicated they want to buy, they too have been waiting for this lab, so that they know what they're buying, you know, and that they know what is the state and the quality of that particular cannabis. I would say that the construction of this lab may well have been about 6 to 7 months delayed. We could say it's because of COVID, we could say it's because of la soufre. Some people would say that there should be no delay because of those things. Soufre should not have stopped anything happening here in St. Vincent and Grenadines. But I could tell you, you know, even some investors have had trouble getting into St. Vincent because of COVID, leaving wherever they are because of lockdowns, or when our airport was closed for a period of time. And so we've had to battle through those periods. I want people to really understand that the delays in getting this lab have been real, and it should be understandable, and that really couldn't do anything faster, because you just couldn't stop la soufre from erupting. If we could have, you know, it would have been wonderful.
But now that the lab is here, would the same farmers be able to access investors?
Now that the lab is here, as I said, of the investors that we have originally offered licenses to, I must tell you, some of them, because of the global economic circumstances, they've not been able to proceed. There have been some investors who are actually US based, and because they're US based, they too have not been able to proceed as fast as they would like either. But we do have a number of investors who have really been the pushers and the movers, and they have been able to establish, and they all maybe at different stages of development. Some are each of them are taking different approaches, different type of processing equipment and all. We've monitored this, and so they have been engaging a certain number of traditional cultivators. Others have indicated they would want a certain amount of quantity of amnesty product and so on. But this is where the challenges would come. The MCA does not purchase amnesty product, you know. And some people suggested, why don't we find money, purchase it, and maybe take it out in the sea and dump it? People have said those kind of things. But the truth is that there may be more investors than product is available, or there may be more traditional cultivators who may want to sell than there are investors. We're hoping that we will eventually grow this industry so that there is that capacity to be able to absorb. How do we then cater for new people entering into the market? You know, it's gonna be. We have been talking to the community college, and we're hoping to sign an MOU with the community college so that persons who go into community college who may want to get into entrepreneurship in cannabis could do so, or those who want to find a job in the cannabis industry at one of the different plants, or maybe do an apprenticeship at the MCA, will be able to do so. We are also a very important measure. The eruption of La Soufrière has destroyed a lot of the habitat that was once there for cannabis. And that habitat, the soil, was ideal for cannabis. We lost a lot of the special species. Now luckily, we developed what's called a seed bank. We collected seeds from a large number of farmers, and we have them at the MCA in a special seed bank with the names of those particular persons. We have those seeds. But we expect a donation of 10,000 special feminized seeds within the next week or two from a company out of Jamaica. And this is going to help us also help the traditional cultivators to upscale the quality of their product. Not that Simison doesn't have great quality, it does. But we are looking to see how the yield and other things like that. And what we're looking to do is the importation of what we call tropical seeds that we know will thrive in the Caribbean, but also give you the kind of results and so forth. So that is going to be another exciting development. And
was it the Tissue Culture Lab, I think it's called, and Orange Hill, working on a strain? Or?
Let me say, we within the next week, we're also going to be signing a MOU with the Tissue Culture Lab. And they have been doing at least 2.5 years of research on different strains. And they have been able to select out some special strains. But in addition, some of these seeds that we expect to come in, we are going to be handing some of those over to the Tissue Culture Lab to grow for us, to produce seedlings from which we'll be able to issue to certain traditional cultivators, and so they would be almost ready to go with seedlings as opposed to having to use seeds themselves.